You'll always be nothing but a black girl who doesn't belong. The venomous words echo through the crowded Chicago subway station, spat by an ex-lover whose cruelty cuts deeper than the winter chill. A 27-year-old marketing assistant, stunning yet scarred by years of abuse and systemic injustice, stands frozen, her heart pounding under the weight of public humiliation. Mocked for her ambition, dismissed for her skin, and haunted by a past that refuses to let go, she faces a moment of despair until a stranger, a wealthy white businessman, steps into her life with a quiet strength that changes everything. What begins as a fleeting act of protection sparks a journey of resilience, love, and triumph over prejudice. Will she rise above the pain to claim her worth? Stay tuned to find out, and don't forget to subscribe to our latest stories. Share where you're listening from in the comments below. What moment will grip you most? The Chicago subway station pulsed with the chaos of rush hour, a swarm of commuters weaving through the dim glow of harsh, fluorescent lights. The air was thick with the scent of damp concrete and hurried footsteps, the platform a restless sea of briefcases and winter coats. Rashida Sow stood near the edge, her breath shallow, her fingers clutching the strap of her worn leather bag. At 27, she was striking, her dark eyes sharp with intelligence, her coiled hair pulled into a neat bun, but weariness clung to her like a shadow. Her navy blazer, carefully pressed despite its frayed cuffs, marked her as a woman fighting to hold her ground in a world that often pushed back. She glanced at her phone, the cracked screen showing 5:47 p.m. The train was late, as usual, and the crowd pressed closer, their impatience buzzing like static. Rashida's focus was on the tracks, willing the rumble of an approaching train to drown out the ache in her chest. She was a marketing assistant, scraping by on a part-time gig that barely covered rent, let alone dreams. Years of being told she was too much, or not enough, had left scars deeper than the ones she'd hidden under long sleeves. Her past, a volatile relationship with a man who'd promised love but delivered pain, lingered like a bruise that refused to fade. A voice, sharp and venomous, sliced through the station's din. "You think you're better than me now?" Rashida's blood ran cold. She knew that voice, that cadence, before she even turned. Malik Turner stood a few feet away, his tall frame cutting an imposing figure in a sleek leather jacket. His charisma, once magnetic, now felt like a trap. His dark eyes glinted with a familiar mix of charm and cruelty, his lips curling into a sneer. "You'll never be more than what they see in you," he spat, the words laced with a racial slur that hit like a slap. The crowd around them stilled, heads turning, but no one moved to help. Some glanced away, their discomfort palpable, while others whispered, "She probably provoked him," their words a quiet betrayal of the stereotypes they carried. Rashida's heart hammered, her throat tightening as memories flooded back. Malik's hands, his temper, the nights she'd spent curled up in fear. She was trapped, the platform's edge behind her, the crowd a wall of indifference. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape, and landed on a man moving through the throng. He was white, mid-30s, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that spoke of wealth and authority. His face was calm, his hazel eyes scanning the station with quiet focus. Without thinking, Rashida lunged toward him, her arms wrapping around his waist as she pressed her face against his chest. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the station's hum, "pretend you're with me." The man stiffened for a split second, his breath catching at the sudden embrace. But something in her trembling grip, in the raw panic of her plea, reached him. Instead of pulling away, his arms came up slowly, encircling her with a steadiness that felt like an anchor. "It's okay," he said softly, his voice low and reassuring, carrying the faint trace of a Midwestern drawl. "You're safe." Rashida clung to him, the clean scent of his cologne grounding her as her pulse raced. She could hear Malik's footsteps approaching, his voice cutting through the crowd. "Who's this?" he demanded, his tone dripping with mockery. "You moving on already?" The stranger turned slightly, keeping Rashida sheltered against his side. "Back off," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "She's with me." The words were simple, but they carried an authority that made Malik pause. Rashida couldn't see her ex's face, but she knew the tightening of his jaw, the flash of temper in his eyes when he didn't get his way. The station seemed to hold its breath, the crowd's murmurs fading into a tense silence. "You don't know what you're getting into," Malik sneered, but there was a crack in his bravado, a hesitation that hadn't been there before. "I think I do," the man replied, his tone unwavering, "and I think you should leave." There was no threat in his words, just a quiet certainty that made Malik's confidence falter. For a long moment, the two men stood locked in a silent standoff, the air thick with unspoken challenge. Then Malik let out a bitter laugh, his footsteps retreating as he muttered, "This ain't over." Rashida didn't move, her face still pressed against the stranger's suit, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat a lifeline against the panic threatening to overwhelm her. "He's gone," the man said after a minute, his voice gentle now. "You can look if you want." Rashida lifted her head slowly, her eyes scanning the platform. Malik's leather jacket was nowhere in sight, the crowd resuming its restless flow as if nothing had happened. Relief flooded through her, so intense her knees nearly buckled. "Thank you," she whispered, stepping back, her hands trembling as she smoothed her blazer. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do." "You don't need to apologize," he said, his hazel eyes warm with concern. "I'm Daniel." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a sleek business card with elegant lettering. "Daniel Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore Solutions. If you need anything, call me, even if it's just to talk." Rashida took the card, her fingers brushing against his briefly. "I'm Rashida," she said, her voice steadier now. I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," Daniel said with a small smile. "Just take care of yourself, okay?" He glanced at the tracks as the rumble of an approaching train vibrated through the platform. "Your train's here." Rashida nodded, tucking the card into her bag. As she stepped toward the train, she turned back once, catching Daniel's gaze. He gave her a slight nod, his expression reassuring, as if to say she wasn't alone. The doors closed and the train pulled away, but the warmth of his kindness lingered, a faint spark in the darkness of her fear. For the first time in months, Rashida felt a glimmer of something she hadn't dared to hope for, a sense that she could survive, maybe even fight back, against the weight of her past. As the train carried her through the city, she clutched Daniel's card, its edges sharp against her palm. She didn't know if she'd call him, but his presence had shifted something inside her, a quiet promise that she wasn't as powerless as Malik wanted her to believe. The subway lights flickered, and Rashida straightened her shoulders, her resolve hardening. This was just the beginning. The subway lights flickered, and Rashida straightened her shoulders, her resolve hardening. This was just the beginning. Clutching Daniel's business card, its edges sharp against her palm, she stepped off the train into the biting Chicago morning. The city's pulse thrummed around her, horns blaring, pedestrians rushing. But inside, a fragile hope stirred, kindled by a stranger's unexpected kindness. By 9 a.m., Rashida stood outside the glass tower of Pinnacle Marketing, her breath visible in the crisp air. Her thrift store blazer, navy and meticulously ironed, hugged her frame, but the frayed cuffs betrayed her struggle. She adjusted her scarf, a gift from her grandmother, Aisha, and smoothed her coiled hair, pinned tightly to project professionalism. Today was her chance, a job interview for a full-time marketing coordinator role. The thought of a steady paycheck, of not choosing between groceries and rent, fueled her steps through the revolving doors. The corporate office gleamed with sterile elegance. Polished marble floors, sleek chrome accents, and floor-to-ceiling windows framing the skyline. Rashida's scuffed flats clicked softly as she followed the receptionist to a conference room. The space was cold, the air heavy with the scent of new leather and coffee. She sat, her portfolio of campaign ideas, crafted late at night after grueling shifts, resting on her lap. Her heart raced, but she forced a smile, determined to prove her worth. The interviewer, a middle-aged white man with thinning hair and a crisp suit, entered with a perfunctory nod. "Mr. Harrison," he introduced himself, barely glancing at her resume. His eyes flicked over her, lingering on her face, her hair, her blazer, before settling back on his notes. The interview began with standard questions, her experience, her skills, but his tone was clipped, his expression distant. Rashida answered confidently, detailing her success in boosting engagement for a small nonprofit on a shoestring budget. Yet Harrison's pen tapped restlessly, his gaze drifting to the window. "Your work is interesting," he said finally, leaning back, "but our clients prefer a familiar look for our brand." The words landed like a punch, their meaning clear despite the polished veneer. Rashida's smile faltered, her hands tightening around her portfolio. "Familiar look," she echoed, her voice steady but thin. Harrison shrugged, his smile tight. "You know, someone who fits their expectations. It's about relatability." The subtext was unmistakable, a polite mask for prejudice, a dismissal of her blackness as too different for their clientele. Rashida's chest burned with humiliation, but she nodded, thanking him for his time. As she left, the receptionist avoided her eyes, and a security guard watched her a beat too long, as if she might pocket a pen on her way out. The weight of their assumptions pressed against her, each step toward the elevator heavier than the last. She'd faced rejection before, but this one stung deeper, a reminder that her talent, her effort, could be overshadowed by the color of her skin. Outside, the city's noise swallowed her thoughts. Rashida wandered, her breath hitching, until she found refuge in a cozy coffee shop a few blocks away. The space was crowded, filled with the clatter of cups and the hum of conversation. She claimed a corner table, its surface scarred with years of use, and sank into a chair, fighting tears. Her reflection in the window showed a woman on the edge, eyes red-rimmed, shoulders slumped. She'd poured everything into that interview, only to be reduced to a stereotype. The portfolio in her bag felt like a mockery now, her dreams folded between its pages. "Mind if I join you?" a voice asked, pulling her from her spiral. Rashida looked up to find Daniel Whitmore standing by her table, his charcoal suit slightly rumpled from the day. His hazel eyes held the same warmth she'd seen on the subway platform, a quiet anchor in her storm. She nodded, too drained to protest, and he sat, setting down a steaming latte. "Rough morning?" he asked, his tone gentle but not pitying. Rashida hesitated, her pride warring with the need to be heard. "I had an interview," she said finally, her voice low. "They didn't want me. Said their clients need someone familiar." She spat the word, her fingers curling into fists. "It's code for not black. They didn't even look at my work." Daniel leaned forward, his expression darkening with understanding. "That's their loss," he said firmly. "They're blind if they can't see your value." She shook her head, tears threatening again. "It's not just them, it's everywhere. I've been told I'm too loud, too different, too me. I keep trying, but it's like I'm running into a wall." Her voice cracked, and she looked away, embarrassed by her vulnerability. Daniel didn't rush to fill the silence. Instead, he waited, his presence steady, until she met his gaze again. "Your uniqueness is your power," he said, his words deliberate. "Don't let them dim it. You've got something they'll never have. Perspective, resilience, heart. That's what makes you unstoppable." Rashida searched his face for condescension but found only sincerity. "You don't even know me," she said, half a challenge. "I know enough," Daniel replied. "I saw how you stood your ground last night, even when you were scared. That's not nothing." He paused, then reached into his pocket, pulling out another business card, identical to the one she still carried. "I meant what I said about calling me. Whitmore Solutions is looking for a client relations specialist. It's not charity. I need someone sharp, someone who sees what others miss. Come interview. Show me what you got." Rashida stared at the card, her heart tugging between skepticism and hope. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't owe me anything." Daniel's smile was small but genuine. "Because I believe in giving people a chance to shine, and something tells me you're meant for more than this." His words echoed her grandmother's voice, Aisha's fierce insistence that Rashida was enough, always enough. "I don't want pity," she said, her voice firm now. "And you won't get it," Daniel assured her. "Just an opportunity. Say you'll try." Rashida's fingers traced the card's edges, her mind racing. She'd spent so long fighting alone, guarding her heart against disappointment. But here was a door, slightly ajar, and a man who saw her, not as a victim, but as a force. "Okay," she said finally, her voice steadier. I'll try. Daniel's face lit up, a spark of excitement in his eyes. Good. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., my office. Bring that portfolio. You're going to need it. He stood, leaving his untouched latte behind. Take care of yourself, Rashida. I'll see you soon. As he walked away, the coffee shop's warmth seemed to seep into her bones. Rashida clutched the card, her resolve reigniting. The rejection still stung, but Daniel's belief in her was a lifeline, a reminder that she wasn't defined by one man's prejudice. She slipped the card into her bag, next to the first one, and stood, her steps lighter. Tomorrow she'd walk into Whitmore Solutions, not as a supplicant, but as a woman ready to claim her place. Tomorrow she'd walk into Whitmore Solutions, not as a supplicant, but as a woman ready to claim her place. Rashida clutched Daniel's business card, its edges now softened from her touch, as she stepped into the glass-walled offices of Whitmore Solutions the next morning. The open-plan space buzzed with energy, employees tapping at sleek monitors, phones ringing, the hum of ambition filling the air. Sunlight streamed through towering windows, glinting off polished glass partitions and modern furniture, but the warmth couldn't erase the knot in Rashida's stomach. Her navy blazer, the same one from yesterday's failed interview, felt like armor, though its frayed cuffs reminded her of the fragility beneath. At 27, Rashida was no stranger to hard work, but this was different. As the new client relations specialist, she faced a labyrinth of systems, protocols, and unspoken expectations. Her desk, tucked in a corner with a view of the Chicago skyline, held a fresh notepad and a company laptop, symbols of a fresh start. Yet the weight of proving herself pressed against her chest. She'd spent years clawing her way through part-time gigs, her marketing degree gathering dust while she battled self-doubt and a past that refused to stay buried. Now Daniel's faith in her was both a lifeline and a challenge. Her first week was a whirlwind of training sessions and client files. She pored over data late into the evening, her eyes burning from the screen's glow. Colleagues were polite but distant, their smiles tight, their glances lingering a beat too long. Sarah, a white woman in her 30s with sharp features and sharper ambition, was the loudest skeptic. During a team huddle, Rashida overheard her muttering to a coworker, "She's only here because the boss likes her type." The words, laced with a sneer, stung like a blade, implying Rashida's hiring was a token gesture, her blackness a checkbox rather than a strength. She swallowed the hurt, channeling it into her work, determined to let her results speak louder than whispers. Rashida's intuition, honed from years of reading people and situations to survive, became her edge. While reviewing a client's portfolio, a major retailer struggling with declining engagement, she noticed a pattern others had missed. Their younger demographic craved authenticity over polished ads. She spent nights crafting a bold campaign idea, blending raw storytelling with targeted social media strategies. When the chance came to pitch to the client, she hesitated, her palms sweaty. Sarah's voice echoed in her mind, but so did Daniel's. "You've got something they'll never have. Perspective, resilience, heart." The presentation room was sleek, its long table surrounded by executives in crisp suits. The retailer's CEO, a stern woman with silver hair, watched Rashida with a skeptical gaze. Rashida stood, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "Your brand's losing ground because it's too perfect," she began, projecting confidence. "Today's customers want real stories, flaws, triumphs, humanity. We can build a campaign around user-generated content, showcasing real people using your products in real moments." She clicked through slides, her data sharp, her vision compelling. The room leaned in, the CEO's skepticism softening into intrigue. By the end, she was nodding. "That's bold," she said. "We're in. Let's make it happen." The deal, a multi-million-dollar contract, sent ripples through Whitmore Solutions. Colleagues who'd barely acknowledged Rashida now offered congratulatory nods, their guarded smiles loosening. In the break room, a junior analyst clapped her on the shoulder saying, "You killed it out there." But Sarah's resentment simmered. As Rashida passed her desk, Sarah's voice carried just loud enough to be heard. "Must be nice to have the boss's ear." The jab, cloaked in workplace banter, implied Rashida's success came from charm, not skill, a stereotype that pricked at her confidence. She bit her lip, refusing to let Sarah's words unravel her triumph. At the weekly team meeting, Daniel stood at the head of the conference table, his presence commanding yet warm. "I want to highlight a game changer," he said, his hazel eyes finding Rashida. "Our new client relations specialist secured the biggest deal of the quarter. Her insight turned a struggling account into a cornerstone of our growth." The room erupted in applause and Rashida's cheeks warmed, a mix of pride and disbelief washing over her. Daniel's praise was a shield against the whispers, a public affirmation of her worth. But as she met his gaze, she saw something more, a flicker of personal pride that made her heart skip, though she pushed the feeling aside. This was about her work, not her heart. After the meeting, colleagues lingered, offering handshakes and questions about her strategy. For the first time, Rashida felt seen, not as an outsider, but as a contributor. Yet Sarah's glare from across the room was a reminder that not everyone was won over. Later, as Rashida organized client notes at her desk, a coworker leaned over, her tone conspiratorial. "People are talking, you know. They think Daniel's playing favorites." Rashida's stomach twisted, the gossip threatening to erode her hard-earned confidence. She forced a smile, replying, "Let them talk. My work speaks for itself." But the words felt hollow, the sting of doubt creeping in. That evening, alone in the office as the city lights glittered beyond the glass, Rashida reviewed her notes for the next client. The silence was a relief after the day's noise, but her mind churned. Sarah's comments, the co-workers' gossip, they echoed the rejection she'd faced before, the voices that told her she didn't belong. Yet the signed contract on her desk was proof she did. She thought of her grandmother Aisha, whose fierce love had taught her to keep fighting, even when the world pushed back. Aisha's voice, steady and unyielding, rang in her ears. "You're enough, baby girl. Always." Rashida's fingers brushed the business card still tucked in her bag, a talisman from that desperate subway moment. Daniel's belief in her had opened this door, but it was her grit that had carried her through. She wasn't here to be anyone's token. She was here to build something real. As she powered down her laptop, the office now dark except for the glow of her desk lamp, she felt a shift inside her. This wasn't just a job, it was a chance to redefine herself, to silence the doubts with every client won, every idea brought to life. Tomorrow she'd return with her head high, ready to prove she was more than anyone's assumptions. The city skyline sparkled outside, a canvas of possibility, and Rashida knew she was only getting started. The city skyline sparkled outside, a canvas of possibility, and Rashida knew she was only getting started. As she stepped into the bustling lobby of Whitmore Solutions the next afternoon, her heels clicked with purpose against the polished marble floor. The open plan office hummed with activity, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, glass walls reflecting the golden light of a Chicago dusk. Rashida carried a stack of client proposals, her mind sharp from her recent triumph. The multi-million-dollar deal she'd secured had shifted the air around her, earning nods of respect from colleagues who once ignored her. Yet the sting of Sarah's whispers lingered, a reminder that her place here was still contested. The lobby was a sleek expanse of modern design, with plush seating and a towering reception desk manned by a security guard named Marcus, whose warm smile had become a daily comfort. Rashida was mid-stride, heading toward the elevators, when a voice shattered the hum of the office. "You think you're better than me now, hiding behind your fancy job?" The words boomed, raw and vicious, freezing her in place. Malik Turner stood in the lobby center, his tall frame dominating the space, his leather jacket out of place among the tailored suits. His dark eyes burned with rage, his charm replaced by a cruelty that clawed at Rashida's resolve. The staff paused, heads turning, papers rustling to a stop. Malik stepped closer, his voice rising. "You'll always be nothing in their eyes," he sneered, lacing his words with a racial slur that hung in the air like smoke. The lobby fell silent, the weight of his venom pressing against every onlooker. Rashida's breath caught, her body rigid as memories surged. Malik's hands, his shouted demands, the nights she'd spent trembling in the dark. Her proposals slipped from her hands, scattering across the floor, and she stood rooted, her heart pounding as the past she'd fought to escape crashed into her present. Employees exchanged uneasy glances, some shifting uncomfortably, their hesitation a silent echo of society's reluctance to confront racial conflict. A junior analyst whispered to another, "This is awkward," as if Rashida's pain were a spectacle to avoid. Marcus, the security guard, gripped his radio but paused, his eyes darting between Malik and the crowd, unsure of his role. Rashida's vision blurred, her knees threatening to buckle, but before she could speak, a figure moved through the crowd with quiet authority. Daniel Whitmore stepped into the lobby, his charcoal suit crisp, his hazel eyes blazing with controlled fury. He positioned himself between Rashida and Malik, his presence a shield. "That's enough," he said, his voice calm, but cutting through the tension like a blade. "Here, value comes from character and talent. Rashida is our future." His words rang out, steady and unyielding, and the room seemed to exhale. The staff erupted in applause, a wave of support that drowned out Malik's venom. Marcus sprang into action, joined by another guard, and they escorted Malik toward the exit, his protest fading as he was led away. Rashida stood frozen, her hands trembling as the lobby resumed its rhythm. Colleagues offered sympathetic nods, but their earlier hesitation lingered in her mind, a subtle reminder of how quickly prejudice could silence action. Daniel turned to her, his expression softening. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low, meant only for her. She nodded, though her throat was too tight to speak. "Let's talk somewhere private," he said, guiding her toward the elevators with a gentle hand on her elbow. They rode in silence to the top floor, where Daniel's private office overlooked the city, its dusk glow casting long shadows across hardwood floors. The space was warm, with bookshelves lined with business texts and a single-frame photo of a lakeside cabin. Rashida sank into a leather chair, her hands still shaking as she clutched the arms. Daniel didn't sit behind his desk, but pulled a chair close, his presence steadying her. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't think he'd find me here." "You don't need to apologize," Daniel said, his tone firm but kind. "He had no right to come here, to say those things." Rashida's eyes dropped to her lap, tears spilling over. The weight of Malik's words, of the staff's initial inaction, pressed against her chest. "He's not wrong," she said, her voice barely audible. "Not about everything. I've spent my life being told I don't belong. By bosses, by strangers, by him. I've been pushed out, belittled, hurt, just for being me." Daniel leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Rashida, look at me." She lifted her eyes, meeting his, and found no pity, only respect. "You've survived more than most people could imagine," he said. "The abuse, the rejection, the walls this world puts up. You've climbed over them all. That's not nothing. You're not nothing. You're extraordinary, and I'm honored to stand beside you." His words cracked something open inside her, and Rashida broke down, sobs shaking her shoulders. She told him everything, how Malik's charm had once drawn her in, only to turn controlling, violent. How she'd endured years of being dismissed, her ideas ignored, her presence scrutinized because of her skin. "I've fought so hard," she said, wiping her eyes. "But sometimes it feels like I'm still that girl he broke, like I'll never be enough." "You're more than enough," Daniel said, his voice steady. "You're the woman who walked into my company and turned a failing account into a win. You're the woman who faces every challenge head on, even when it hurts. You don't need saving, Rashida. You've been saving yourself your whole life. I'm just lucky to be part of your story." He reached out, his hand hovering before gently resting on hers, a quiet gesture of solidarity. Rashida's tears slowed, her breathing steadying. For the first time, she felt truly seen. Not as a victim, not as a stereotype, but as a woman with strength and worth. "Why do you believe in me?" she asked, searching his face. Daniel's smile was small but genuine. "Because I see you, not the lies he told you, not the doubts others put on you. I see the woman who's going to change things, starting right here." She nodded, a spark of trust igniting in her chest. The office was quiet now, the city's lights twinkling beyond the windows. Rashida felt the weight of the day begin to lift, replaced by a fragile but growing belief in herself. Daniel's defense, the staff's applause, it wasn't just about today. It was about proving she belonged, not just to them, but to herself. As she stood to leave, her shoulders squared, she knew this moment was a turning point. The past had come for her, but she was ready to fight back, with allies like Daniel by her side, and her resilience as her greatest weapon. The past had come for her, but she was ready to fight back, with allies like Daniel by her side, and her resilience as her greatest weapon. As Rashida left Whitmore Solutions that evening, the Chicago skyline glittered against the twilight, its lights a reminder of the strength she was reclaiming. In the weeks that followed, her world began to shift, not just at work, but in quieter, more personal moments that wove her closer to Daniel. Their first dinner was unplanned, born of a late night at the office. Daniel's penthouse, perched high above the city, was a warm contrast to its sleek exterior. Wood-paneled walls, soft leather furniture, and a kitchen cluttered with well-used cookbooks. Rashida sat at the marble island, watching Daniel chop vegetables with surprising skill. His tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. "I didn't peg you for a chef," she teased, sipping a glass of red wine he'd poured. He grinned, his hazel eyes catching the light. "It's my escape. No emails, no meetings. Just me and a good recipe." Over plates of pasta, they talked. Not about work, but about life. Daniel shared his struggles, his voice quiet as he described the loneliness that wealth couldn't fill. "I built this company from nothing," he said, staring at the city beyond the windows. "But success doesn't keep you company at night. I was running on empty until, well, recently." His gaze met hers and Rashida felt a warmth she wasn't ready to name. She countered with stories of her grandmother, Aisha, whose fierce spirit had carried her through childhood. She'd tell me, "You don't need permission to shine, baby girl." I'm still learning to believe her. Their dinners became a ritual, often at a local diner near the office, its neon sign buzzing and booths worn from years of late-night conversations. The diner smelled of coffee and fried onions, its jukebox playing old Motown hits. Rashida found herself laughing more, her guard lowering as Daniel recounted his college mishaps or listened intently to her memories of Aisha's Sunday dinners. Each story chipped away at the wall she'd built, but a part of her held back, wary of needing him too much, of losing the independence she'd fought so hard for. At Whitmore Solutions, Rashida's star continued to rise. The boardroom, with its long mahogany table and panoramic city views, was where she pitched her boldest idea yet, a diversity training program. The inspiration came from a sting she couldn't shake. During a coffee break, she overheard a colleague, Emily, a white woman with a clipped tone, say to another, "She's good, but does she have to be so intense?" The word, laced with judgment, was a coded jab at Rashida's assertiveness, a stereotype that painted black women as aggressive for simply being confident. Rashida's jaw tightened, but she channeled the hurt into action. Standing before the leadership team, her voice steady, she outlined the program. "Our clients are diverse," she said, clicking through slides that detailed employee feedback. "But our culture isn't keeping up. Microaggressions, like dismissing someone's passion as too much, erode trust. Training can bridge that gap, make us stronger." The room was quiet, some executives shifting uncomfortably, their hesitation a subtle nod to the biases she aimed to confront. But others nodded, and Daniel's approving glance bolstered her. "This is a priority," he said, his tone firm. "Let's move forward." The program gained traction, and colleagues began seeking Rashida's input, her desk becoming a hub of ideas. Even Emily offered a cautious, "Nice work," though her smile didn't reach her eyes. Yet Rashida's growing confidence at work clashed with her heart's uncertainty. She felt the pull toward Daniel, his quiet support a constant in her days. At the diner one evening, as rain streaked the windows, he reached for her hand across the checkered tablecloth, his touch warm. "You're doing incredible things," he said, his voice soft. "I'm proud of you." Rashida's heart raced, but fear crept in, fear of dependency, of trusting too much after a past that had taught her to guard her heart. "I don't want to need you," she admitted, pulling her hand back. "I fought too hard to stand on my own." Daniel's expression didn't falter. "This isn't about needing me," he said. "It's a partnership, not a rescue. You're not losing yourself. You're letting someone walk beside you. His words echoed Aisha's wisdom, and Rashida felt her defenses soften. Later, as they stood outside the diner, the city's lights reflecting off wet pavement, Daniel stepped closer. "Can I?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rashida nodded, and their first kiss was soft, tentative, a promise wrapped in vulnerability. Her lips lingered on his, the warmth spreading through her chest, but she pulled back, her breath shaky. "We keep this separate from work," she said firmly. "I need to stand on my own there." "Agreed," Daniel said, his smile reassuring. "You set the boundaries. I'm just happy to be here." The kiss marked a turning point, a crack in the armor she'd worn for so long. Rashida felt her heart open, not to dependency, but to the possibility of trust, not just in Daniel, but in herself. Back at Whitmore Solutions, the boardroom buzzed with preparations for the next client pitch. But Rashida's diversity program was the talk of the office. Colleagues who once whispered now asked for her advice, and the atmosphere shifted, however slightly. Yet Emily's intense comment lingered, a reminder of the stereotypes Rashida still navigated. She countered them with every meeting, every email, her confidence growing with each small victory. At night, alone in her small apartment, she'd trace the edges of Daniel's business card, now a keepsake beside her bed. Isha's voice echoed, "You don't need permission to shine." Rashida was beginning to believe it. As she left the boardroom one evening, the city's skyline glowing through the glass, Rashida felt a quiet strength settle in her bones. Daniel's support, her resilience, and the impact of her work were weaving a new narrative, one where she wasn't just surviving, but thriving. She wasn't erasing her past, but building on it, turning pain into purpose. Tomorrow, she'd walk back into Whitmore Solutions, not just as an employee, but as a woman claiming her voice, her heart, and her place in a world that was starting to see her for who she truly was. Tomorrow, she'd walk back into Whitmore Solutions, not just as an employee, but as a woman claiming her voice, her heart, and her place in a world that was starting to see her for who she truly was. Rashida stood before her bathroom mirror, adjusting the neckline of an emerald green gown that hugged her curves, its fabric catching the light like a promise. Tonight was no ordinary evening. It was the night of Whitmore Solutions Charity Gala, a high-profile event to fund anti-racism initiatives. Daniel had spent weeks planning it, his passion for the cause evident in every detail. But what Rashida hadn't expected was his quiet request over dinner the previous night. "I want you to speak. Your story, your voice. It's what this night needs." The Chicago ballroom was a vision of grandeur, its crystal chandeliers casting prisms across a polished hardwood floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city's skyline, its lights twinkling like stars against the night. Tables draped in white linen were adorned with fresh orchids, and the air carried the scent of champagne and anticipation. Guests in black tie attire mingled. Philanthropists, CEOs, community leaders, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of a live jazz quartet. Rashida entered on Daniel's arm, her heart pounding beneath the elegance of her gown. His tailored tuxedo accentuated his broad shoulders, but it was the warmth in his hazel eyes that steadied her nerves. As they moved through the crowd, Rashida felt the weight of subtle glances. A woman in a pearl necklace clutched her purse tighter as Rashida passed, her smile faltering. A quiet, unconscious assumption that Rashida didn't belong. Another guest, a silver-haired man, offered a nod but kept his distance, his eyes lingering on her skin rather than her face. These microaggressions, subtle as they were, pricked at her, reminders of the prejudice that lingered even in spaces meant to champion change. She tightened her grip on Daniel's arm, and he squeezed her hand, his silent reassurance grounding her. In a quiet moment by a window, Daniel leaned close. "You're nervous," he said. Not a question, but an observation, his voice low and warm. Rashida nodded, her fingers smoothing the note cards in her clutch, where her speech was carefully written. "I've never spoken to a crowd like this," she admitted. "What if they don't listen? What if they see me as less?" Daniel's gaze held hers, unwavering. "They'll listen because your truth is undeniable. You're not just speaking for you. You're speaking for everyone who's ever been made to feel small." Her preparation had consumed her for days, each word of her speech crafted to balance vulnerability and strength. She thought of her grandmother, Aisha, whose resilience had shaped her, and of the countless times she'd been dismissed, diminished, or doubted because of her skin. The speech wasn't just about her, it was a call to action, a challenge to the room's privilege. As the evening progressed, Daniel took the stage, his voice commanding as he outlined the gala's mission: to fund programs dismantling systemic racism. The crowd applauded, but Rashida felt the weight of her moment approaching. When Daniel introduced her, the spotlight found her, and the room fell silent. Rashida Sow, a brilliant force in our company and my partner in this cause, has a story you need to hear, he said, his pride palpable. Rashida's legs trembled as she ascended the stage, her gown shimmering under the lights. The microphone felt heavy in her hand, the sea of faces before her a blur of expectation. She took a breath, Aisha's voice echoing in her mind. You don't need permission to shine. I once believed I was worthless because of my skin, she began, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. I've been told I don't belong, in jobs and relationships, in rooms like this. I've been made to feel small, invisible, or threatening, just for existing. The crowd was silent, some leaning forward, others shifting uncomfortably. But here's the truth. We're all born with value. No one, not a single person, has the right to take that away. Her voice grew stronger, each word a release of years of pain. I stand here because I refuse to let those lies define me. If I can rise, so can you. So can anyone who's ever been told they're not enough. The room erupted in applause, the sound crashing over her like a wave. Tears pricked her eyes, but she stood tall, her heart swelling with a power she'd never felt before. Daniel joined her on stage, his smile radiant as he took her hand. Rashida and I are launching the Aisha Sow Foundation, he announced, his voice ringing with conviction. Named after the woman who raised her, this foundation will fight racism through education, advocacy, and opportunity. Rashida isn't just my partner in this. She's the woman I love, and together we're building a future where everyone's value is seen. The crowd roared, some standing, their applause a chorus of affirmation. Rashida's breath caught. Daniel's public declaration of love anchored her in the moment. The foundation's name, honoring Aisha, was a tribute to the woman who taught her to stand firm. As they stepped off the stage, guests approached, offering handshakes and praise. A young woman, her eyes bright with tears, whispered, "Your words changed me." Yet Rashida noticed others, the purse clutcher, the silver-haired man, keeping their distance, their smiles polite but guarded, a reminder that change was slow. In a quiet corner, Daniel pulled her close, his hand warm against her back. "You were incredible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You moved them. You moved me." Rashida smiled, her heart full. "I was terrified," she admitted, "but I felt Aisha with me, pushing me forward." Daniel's eyes softened. "She'd be proud, and I'm proud to call you my partner. In this, in everything." The word partner resonated, a promise of equality, not rescue. As the gala wound down, Rashida stood by the windows, the city's lights stretching out before her. The weight of the evening, of speaking her truth, of Daniel's love, of the foundation bearing Aisha's name, settled into her bones. She was no longer just a survivor, she was a leader, her voice a beacon for others. Tomorrow she'd return to the world with a new sense of purpose, ready to build on this night, to carry her story forward with unshakable conviction. Tomorrow she'd return to the world with a new sense of purpose, ready to build on this night, to carry her story forward with unshakable conviction. Rashida stood in the doorway of her new apartment, the scent of fresh paint mingling with the warmth of polished wood floors. The space, a secure two-bedroom in a sleek Chicago high-rise, was a far cry from her old, cramped studio. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city's heartbeat, and a doorman station promised safety, a luxury she hadn't known in years. The apartment was a company benefit, Daniel had explained, extended to all key staff to ensure focus and security. Rashida ran her fingers along the granite countertop, her heart settling into the quiet assurance of a home where fear no longer lingered. The move had been swift, Prompted by Malik's relentless attempts to reach her, calls she'd blocked, emails intercepted by Whitmore Solutions Security, Daniel's lawyers had secured a restraining order, and the silence that followed was a balm. For the first time, Rashida slept without checking the locks, her dreams untainted by the shadow of her ex. But the transition wasn't seamless. On her first day in the building, the security guard, a middle-aged man with a skeptical squint, hesitated at the desk, his hand hovering over the visitor log. "You live here?" he asked, his tone implying she was out of place. Rashida's smile tightened, the sting of everyday profiling sharp, but she handed him her keycard, her voice firm. "Apartment 12B. I'm a resident." He nodded, flustered, but the moment lingered, a reminder of the biases she still navigated. Weeks later, Rashida stood on a grassy lot in a Chicago neighborhood, the site of the Aisha Sow Community Center's groundbreaking ceremony. The air was crisp, the sky a vibrant blue, and a crowd of community members, donors, and Whitmore Solutions staff gathered around a ceremonial shovel. The center, named for her grandmother, would be a haven for marginalized families, offering housing, job training, and support for those rebuilding their lives. Rashida's heart swelled as she surveyed the site, envisioning gardens where children would play and rooms where hope would take root. Daniel stood beside her, his presence steady, his suit swapped for a casual blazer that made him seem more partner than CEO. As they took the stage together, Rashida felt the weight of the moment. "This center is about second chances," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "It's for the woman escaping a past that tried to break her, for the family told they don't belong. We're building a place where value is seen, not questioned." Daniel followed, his words weaving seamlessly with hers. "Rashida and I share this vision," he said, his hand brushing hers. "Together, we're creating a legacy of change, inspired by a woman whose strength lives in every brick we lay." The crowd applauded, their cheers a testament to the partnership Rashida and Daniel embodied. Among the faces, Rashida spotted Sarah, her once skeptical colleague, now clapping with genuine warmth. After the ceremony, Sarah approached, her expression sheepish. "I was wrong about you," she said, her voice low. "I judged you before I knew you. I'm sorry." Rashida nodded, the apology a small but significant victory. "Thank you," she replied, her tone gracious but firm. "Let's keep building something better." Other colleagues offered smiles, their respect hard-earned, and Rashida felt the shift. She was no longer an outsider, but a leader shaping the company's future. That evening, Daniel had arranged a private dinner on the rooftop of her new building, a surprise that greeted Rashida as she stepped onto the terrace. Twinkling lights were strung above a single table, set with candles and a bouquet of white roses. The city sprawled below, its lights a tapestry of possibility. Daniel, in a navy sweater that softened his usual polish, pulled out her chair, his smile nervous but warm. "I wanted tonight to be special," he said, pouring wine as they sat. The meal, grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, was simple but perfect, each bite a reminder of the care he poured into their moments together. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily, their laughter mingling with the city's hum. But Rashida sensed a shift in Daniel's demeanor, a quiet intensity in his gaze. He set down his glass, his fingers brushing hers across the table. "Rashida," he began, his voice steady but thick with emotion, "you're my home. You've changed everything. How I see the world, how I see myself. I want to build our future together, not just as partners in work, but in life." He reached into his pocket, producing a small velvet box. Inside was a platinum ring, a single diamond catching the candlelight. Rashida's breath caught, her heart racing with a joy she hadn't dared to imagine. "Will you marry me?" Daniel asked, his hazel eyes searching hers. "Will you let me love you, stand beside you, for the rest of our lives?" Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of certainty. "Yes," she said, her voice strong. "Yes, Daniel. I'll love you as fiercely as I've fought for myself." He slipped the ring onto her finger. Its fit perfect, and they kissed, the city's lights blurring around them in a moment that felt infinite. As they sat, hands entwined, Rashida reflected on her journey. She thought of the terrified woman on the subway platform, clutching a stranger for safety. She thought of the rejections, the whispered prejudices, the nights she doubted her worth. Now she stood on this rooftop, a ring on her finger, a community center bearing Aisha's name, and a man who saw her as an equal. "I was so scared to trust again," she said softly, her voice catching. "But you showed me I could be whole, not just healed." Daniel squeezed her hand. "You were always whole," he said. "I just got to witness you claiming it." Rashida smiled, her heart full. She was no longer defined by her past, but by the future she was building. With Daniel, with the community, with herself. As the candles flickered, casting shadows across the rooftop, Rashida knew her worth was undeniable. Tomorrow she'd step into the world not just as a survivor, but as a woman ready to lead, love, and change lives, her strength a beacon for all who followed. Thank you for joining Rashida and Daniel on their transformative journey from a chance encounter to a powerful partnership. Their story reminds us that resilience, love, and the courage to claim one's worth can overcome even the deepest wounds of prejudice. We hope Rashida's strength and Daniel's unwavering support inspired you as much as they moved us. What was your favorite moment in their story? Did Rashida's speech at the gala resonate with you, or perhaps Daniel's quiet acts of allyship? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how this tale touched your heart. Your feedback fuels our storytelling, so let us know where you're listening from and what kind of love story you'd like to hear next. Thank you for being part of our community, and we can't wait to share more stories with you soon. Until next time, keep believing in your unbreakable value.